Hi everyone, I'm Amy. Recently, there's been a surprisingly heated debate among historical drama fans over the C-drama Pursuit of Jade. It's a drama of love, but also of battle, very much in the style of a classic costume idol drama. But this time, the controversy isn't about the plot, it's about the face. This is the debate of the foundation general, the 粉底液将军, with foundation referring to makeup, and the term intended to mock the male lead, Zhang Linghe, for always appearing to be flawless with perfect makeup in every battle scene. Now, the criticism comes in two parts. First, no matter how intense the battlefield gets, the male lead's appearance stays almost untouched, clean and polished, like he just stepped out of a studio instead of a fight. And second, many viewers felt his overall look was simply too delicate, too refined. And for some audiences, that feels completely at odds with what they imagined an ancient Chinese general was supposed to look like. I guess many of them were imagining more of a rugged look that we might imagine for historical generals like Lu Bu or Shang Yu. So if this is so out of touch with historical accuracy, why did the production team make it this way? Were they simply oblivious? Well, the simple answer is that Pursuit of Jade is a costume idol drama. Some historical dramas are known as 历史正剧, which means that they're intended to be more historically grounded. These are set in real dynasties with characters based on real historical figures. These stories are still dramatized because that's what sells. But the main story beats tries to stay faithful to the historical events that the drama is based on. But on the other hand, what is arguably more popular nowadays is what is known as 古装偶像剧, costume idol dramas. These could be loosely inspired by real history, but are typically set in fictional worlds with their own fictional stories. The dynasties are made up, the characters are fictional, and even when there are historical references, they're usually vague. Pursuit of Jade falls squarely into this category. It's loosely inspired by the Song dynasty, but it never explicitly says so. It's more of an if you know kind of detail. And that distinction matters. Because as the name suggests, costume idol dramas are built around the idols themselves. The focus isn't strict realism. It's visual appeal and emotional storytelling. These shows are meant to feel immersive, yes, but not necessarily realistic. They're stylized versions of the past, where beauty, atmosphere, and character chemistry often take priority over historical accuracy. In this case, critical viewers were comparing Pursuit of Jade to more historically grounded C-dramas like King's War. So whether you like it or not, the perfectly clean face in the middle of a battlefield in Pursuit of Jade isn't really a mistake. It's a choice. But that brings us to another interesting question. Is it really true all generals must be rugged and rough, hardened but not beautiful? Well, it turns out, no. There were actually quite a few generals in Chinese history who are remembered today not just for their feats as a general, but also for how beautiful they were. We have to start with who was possibly the most beautiful general of Chinese history, Gao Changgong, the prince of Lan Ling of the Northern Qi dynasty. He was so beautiful that he is remembered today as one of the four most handsome men of Chinese history. He lived during the mid-6th century, and historical records describe his beauty. It is said that he had a gentle appearance, but a strong spirit. His voice and appearance were both beautiful. According to later Tang Dynasty texts, his skin was as white as a beautiful woman's. And history says that he was so beautiful that his appearance did the opposite of striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. His beauty became a direct threat to his authority, and his face was a distraction that created inappropriate thoughts. If an enemy soldier looked at a commander and saw someone white as a beautiful woman, they didn't feel the urge to retreat. They felt a surge of misplaced confidence. To solve this problem, Gao Changgong decided to hide his beauty beneath a mask so that he could be seen as a monster instead of a masterpiece. According to the old book of Tang, the prince of Lan Ling, Gao Changgong, was brave by nature, but possessed a face like a woman's. He disliked that he was not imposing enough to intimidate the enemy. So he carved a mask out of wood and wore it whenever he went into battle. In 564 CE, during the Battle of Mangshan, a massive army of 100,000 troops from northern Zhou laid siege to the city of Luoyang in the northern Qi. Gao Changgong led 500 cavalry through the enemy forces in order to bring help to the city. Wearing his mask, he cut through the battlefield and fought his way all the way to the gates of the city. But the soldiers defending the city didn't dare to open the gates. The defending soldiers were so desperate that they didn't believe the man in the mask was their prince. They couldn't recognize him through the chaos. They feared he was a fake, an enemy disguised as a demon. So he removed his mask. In that moment, his beauty became a strategic tool. When the soldiers saw his unmistakably handsome, jade-like face, they immediately knew who it was. The contrast between his delicate features and his blood-stained armor provided a morale boost that no fierce general could have achieved. The gates were opened, and the northern Qi forces launched a coordinated counterattack, eventually defeating the northern Zhou army. To celebrate their beautiful general's bravery and victory, his own soldiers even created a battlefield anthem for him, the Lan Ling Ru Zhen Qu. It was a performance that recreated Gao Changgong's heroic deeds during the battle through song and dance. He was also deeply respected for how he treated his men. He was said to possess a beauty of spirit that matched his face. Despite being a prince, he was famously humble about his looks, never using his beauty for vanity, but instead sharing even the simplest gifts with his men. It was said that as a general, he attended to even the smallest matters personally. Whenever he received something sweet, even if it was just a single melon or a few fruits, he would share it with his soldiers. Gao Changgong was truly the beautiful general. He was a beautiful man with skin as white as a woman's, who felt he had to wear a monster's mask to prove his worth as a man. While today's foundation general criticism attempts to mock actors for looking too perfect for battle, Gao Changgong was actually too beautiful for the battlefield. Gao Changgong had to wear a mask to hide his beauty, but the legendary general and strategist Zhou Yu of the Wu region of the Three Kingdoms period had no such problem. He was one of the most celebrated men of his time, not just as a military commander, but as a person. According to the records of the Three Kingdoms, Zhou Yu was tall and strong, with a handsome appearance. The official record within the first few lines of his biography made a point of describing how he looked, and later historical works kept repeating it. He is consistently described as tall, robust, and beautiful in both form and features. Even modern writers continue to use him as an example of a man who was handsome, elegant, and accomplished. The image of the ideal man. And it wasn't just his face. He was also known for his grace, his patience, and a talent for music so finely tuned that he could easily detect a single wrong note in a performance just by ear. It is said that if there's a mistake in the music, Zhou Yu would look back. He would look back, and the musicians knew immediately that they had made a mistake. Historical records describe Zhou Yu as brilliant and charismatic, capturing the attention of everyone around him. Over time, his nickname, Zhou Lang, became more than just his name. It became a kind of archetype. The image of a young, beautiful, cultivated man whose looks and talent were inseparable. A veteran general, Chen Pu, didn't like Zhou Yu at first, dismissing him as a young man who didn't earn his position. But even he eventually came around, saying that to befriend Zhou Yu is like drinking fine wine. You become intoxicated without even realizing it. You don't decide to be drunk on Zhou Yu, it just happens. He was the kind of person who made even his critics fall for him without meaning to. Interestingly, the famous but fictional novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms keeps Zhou Yu's beauty but rewrites his heart. In this story, Zhou Yu is reimagined as petty, arrogant, and extremely jealous of his rival Zhuge Liang, and famously said, "Since heaven created Zhou Yu, why did it also create Zhuge Liang? But according to historical records, Zhou Yu and Zhuge Liang barely interacted. There is no record of rivalry, no record of jealousy. Just a brilliant, elegant, and beautiful general who needed no mask. In a previous video, I talked about the 3 Dugu sisters who each became an empress of 3 different dynasties. In that video, I mentioned that their father, the general Dugu Xin of northern Zhou, is remembered in a special way in Chinese history for being the father of 3 empresses. But what I didn't mention is that he is also remembered for being extremely beautiful. Now, don't get me wrong, Dugu Xin was certainly a capable general in his own right. And he actually held one of the highest military positions of the northern Zhou. But it is fascinating that he is remembered less as a general, but more for his daughters and his own beauty. According to the book of Zhou, he was beautiful in both appearance and bearing, and was skilled in both horsemanship and archery. He was described as having a dignified and refined manner. Not just handsome to look at, but elegant in the way he carried himself. And historical records even mentioned his fashion sense by saying that since his youth, he took great care in his grooming and attire, hoping his dress and appearance would stand out from the crowd. Dugu Xin wanted to stand out, and he did. He rose quickly through the ranks, and later writers often hinted that his looks opened doors for him before his official rank caught up. But perhaps the most famous story about Dugu Xin is about a hat. One day, while returning from a hunt in Qingzhou, Dugu Xin rode back into the city at full speed as evening fell. Along the way, the wind caught his hat and blew it slightly askew. He didn't notice. He didn't fix it. He rode through the city gates looking slightly disheveled and thought nothing of it. The next morning, every man in the city was wearing his hat tilted to one side. They were copying him. Not a battle, not a speech, not a decree, a hat, blown crooked by the wind, and an entire city followed. This story became so famous that it created a new saying in Chinese, 侧帽风流, the charm of the tilted hat. This phrase is used to describe the kind of effortless, unintentional style that cannot be taught, but is often copied. That is who Dugu Xin was. A man so naturally striking that even his accidents became trends. Today, Dugu Xin's name appears again and again in modern lists of historical male beauties and top handsome men, and he is remembered as the most beautiful man of his time. Dugu Xin's beauty was simple, effortless, and undeniable. The next beautiful general we will talk about is Murong Chong from former Yin of the 16 Kingdoms period. It was a time when China was fragmented into more than a dozen rival states, each fighting for survival. Murong Chong was a grand marshal who led massive armies of over 20,000 soldiers, and he was also a prince, the son of Emperor Murong Jun. And he is remembered today as one of the great male beauties of Chinese history. According to the book of Jing, Murong Chong, at the age of 12, already possessed beauty that was extraordinary and dangerous. His beauty was described as the bearing of Long Yang. In classical Chinese, this was a coded way of saying that his beauty could even draw the romantic attention of other men. And that is exactly what happened. In 370 CE, when former Qing conquered former Yin, the 12-year-old prince was taken captive along with his older sister, Princess Qinghe. The emperor of former Qing, Fu Jian, saw them and was so struck by their beauty that he took both of them into his palace. It is said that the siblings monopolized the emperor's favor. No one else in the palace could compare. Emperor Fu Jian became so infatuated with the Murong siblings that his ministers grew alarmed. They urged the emperor to send them away, but he refused. Instead, the emperor compared Murong Chong to a phoenix, the most beautiful creature in Chinese mythology, untamable, rare, and impossible to possess. The emperor said that a phoenix could only rest in a wutong tree and could only drink from a sacred spring. And so he planted tens of thousands of wutong trees and bamboo around the palace to make the palace worthy of Murong Chong. But the emperor's love of the Murong siblings was not a secret. The city was talking about them. Everyone knew. And a popular rhyme spread through the capital city, Chang'an, that said, "One female and one male, flying together into the imperial palace." This rhyme was a criticism of the distractive power of beauty. It also reflected the city's shock that the emperor's obsession with the Murong siblings' beauty was so great that it transcended gender. Eventually, under constant pressure from his ministers, Emperor Fujian released Murong Chong from the palace and gave him a governorship. But by 383 CE, the former Qing Empire was beginning to collapse, and the now 24-year-old Murong Chong raised an army and marched on Chang'an. It was a campaign of vengeance. 2 years later, Murong Chong captured Chang'an and declared himself emperor at the very place where Fujian had once planted thousands of trees to keep a beautiful boy happy. The phoenix had come back, and this time, no one had put him in a cage. But there would not be a happy ending for him. After becoming emperor, Murong Chong grew increasingly indulgent and quickly lost the support of his followers, leading to his assassination the following year, when he was 27 years old. Murong Chong's life was short, violent, and tragically shaped by the beauty that he is remembered for today. Our next beautiful general comes from the Chen dynasty of the southern and northern dynasties period. His name is Han Zigao, and he is often referred to today in modern stories as the male empress. Han Zigao was born into a poor family in Kuaiji, in what is today Zhejiang province. When he was 16 years old, he was spotted by a man named Chen Qian, who would later become Emperor Wen of the Chen dynasty. And the reason Chen Qian stopped to look? Han Zigao's face. According to the Book of Chen, his appearance was beautiful, resembling a woman. Other accounts describe him as slender and fair as a beautiful woman, with luscious hair and naturally arched brows. It was said that all who saw him could not help but to stare. The 16-year-old boy was so striking that Chen Qian stopped his carriage, introduced himself, and asked if Han Zigao would be willing to come with him. Han Zigao was struggling to survive, so this was an opportunity for him. He said yes, and he went with Chen Qian. And that was the beginning of their relationship. The Book of Chen says that the emperor favored and loved Han Zigao deeply and never let him leave his side. The emperor once dreamt that he was riding a horse up a mountain, and the road became so treacherous that he was about to fall, but Han Zigao pushed and supported him, allowing him to ascend. That is what the official record says, never left his side. And even in his dreams, Han Zigao was the one holding him up. But Han Zigao was not a passive favorite. He was not content to be beautiful and decorative. The Book of Chen says that as Han Zigao grew, he gradually learned riding and archery and showed considerable courage and resolve. His wish was to become a general. And he did. He rose to become a high-ranking military commander, led major campaigns, and is described in historical records as a man of genuine loyalty and ability, not just a man of beautiful appearance. His story was so fascinating that a play was written about him in the Ming Dynasty called Nan Wang Hou. In that play, Chen Qian promises to crown him as his empress. And that plot point stuck, giving Han Zigao the nickname of male empress that many modern stories refer to him as today. Han Zigao was never actually an empress, but his face was so remarkable that a playwright 1,000 years later decided he should have been. If Gao Changgong was the general who had to hide his beauty to survive the battlefield, the Three Kingdoms general, Zhao Yun, is the general whose beauty was created by the battlefield of the human imagination. If you grew up watching Chinese historical dramas, reading wuxia novels, or playing the Dynasty Warriors games, you probably know exactly who Zhao Yun is. The young general in spotless white robes, the silver spear, the white horse, a face like carved jade, charging alone into an army of 10,000. That is exactly how he is described in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Today, when we talk about beautiful generals in Chinese pop culture, Zhao Yun is often the first example that people think of. But what if I told you that that image is most likely entirely fictional? With the other beautiful generals that we talked about so far, we saw clear records of their beauty in the historical records. But these records do not describe Zhao Yun in the same way at all. Instead, the records of the Three Kingdoms says that Zhao Yun's conduct was constant and dignified. And even unofficial accounts describe Zhao Yun as he was over 6 feet tall, almost 2 meters, with an imposing and heroic bearing. Dignified, imposing, heroic. Very nice. But not quite the words I would use to describe someone that was beautiful. This was the description of a big, battle-hardened, and scary general, not an idol. Instead of being known for his face, Zhao Yun is remembered in history for his character. When Liu Bei wanted to reward his generals by distributing captured farmland as personal estate, it was Zhao Yun who stood up and argued against it. The people have suffered greatly. We should return the fields and houses to the people so that they may settle and recover before we ask them to serve. The real Zhao Yun was a general of moral courage, whose face was invented by storytellers, dressed in white by opera, and handed to us by film and television as if it had always been true. Gao Changgong was a general so genuinely beautiful that he had to wear a mask to be taken seriously on the battlefield. And Zhao Yun was likely never beautiful at all, but often seen today as one of the most beautiful generals of Chinese history. So in a way, Zhao Yun is a foundation general too, wearing a fictional foundation for over 1,000 years. So it turns out, not all generals must be rugged and buff. Sometimes, beautiful men could also be successful generals too. I mean, it kind of makes sense to me that some drama viewers expect a certain look from their battlefield generals. But we are talking about costume idol dramas after all. And costume idol dramas need idols. At least I am happy that there are beautiful generals for me to watch. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you liked today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.